The idea of synchronicity, which is the theory of meaningful coincidence. Our lives are full of coincidences, and Jung was trying to say that there's, in some coincidences, there's a great deal of meaning, or there are lessons to be learned, appealed to me as a writer. So I wrote 2 songs about synchronicity. One, symbolism is basically synchronicity. We see a symbol of something and then it reflects back on our reality. For example, in King of Pain, I actually said this. I was in Jamaica and there was a black spot on the sun. You could see it visibly. And I said, there's a black spot on the sun today. And I was very depressed. I was drunk, I think. I said, that's my soul up there. God, it's terrible. And then there was a black hat in the tree. And the lyrics were a conversation. And that parallel between symbols that you see in your own life is what I think art's about, basically. So synchronicity as a concept for the whole album was the one that coincidentally worked for the whole thing. Walking in Your Footsteps was I did the sequence on my sequence, a very simple sequence on 1 chord, and it was a kind of, the pace of it was walking pace, and I started to walk across the field with it in my headphones, and the line "walking in your footsteps" came up, and I thought, well, what could that be about? Is there a story behind that? And I thought of whose footsteps are we walking in? And I thought, well, the dinosaurs were once the rulers of this planet, you know. I'm sure they thought they were here forever. They were wrong. They're now extinct, and I think we could head for the same thing. So that song was about, we think we're very bright, but in fact we're not, you know. Dinosaurs had brains the size of peas. Well, some presidents have been elected with less, so I don't think we've come that far. It's kind of a despondent song. Oh my God, it's actually an old song. It's about 8 years old, which we reworked, and it's a sort of prayer to the Almighty. Mother was written by Andy, which we love because it was so crazy, it was so bizarre, you know, totally bizarre. A lot of people find this song offensive, but we kind of liked its edginess, you know. I was going into this sort of sinister, nice sound, if I can put it that way. So Mother kind of offset that. And then Stuart wrote Miss Gradenko, which I think was about totalitarian governments. I always did pretty well singing Stuart's songs. We had similar ideas about melody, and so it was quite easy to sing Stuart's songs. It was impossible to sing Andy's because we had totally different ideas. But I used to enjoy singing Stuart's songs. Synchronicity II was about a sort of suburban nightmare, and the story was told juxtaposed with the story of a monster coming out of a lake in Scotland. So as this poor suburban man's life gets worse, his wife nags him, the boss bullies him, you know, he's driving to work like a lemming, you know, in the rush hour. As he gets worse and worse, this monster gets closer and closer to the surface and eventually comes and attacks a village. So it was kind of synchronicity that the symbol for his life and for his madness was this monster. I sat at the piano and wrote Every Breath You Take. I knew it was the biggest hit we'd ever have. I knew it was a hit, which is why it was so easy to put it on the album, despite the cries of saying it was simplistic from the other members of the band. So yeah, I knew this record would do it, even when I just written it, when it was just a mark on a piece of paper. And it was very easy to realize it in the studio once we decided to do it. I don't know whether it was the best song I wrote. It was certainly the most powerful, certainly the most successful. I still sing it, although now it has more than one meaning. In retrospect, when I look at Every Breath You Take, at first I thought it was quite a kind of romantic song, you know, but really I found it a little sinister, you know. It's about control, it's about surveillance in a way. And I'm intrigued as to why it was such a big hit, you know. It sold millions and it was played. I think I got a certificate the other day, said in 1 year it had 1 million plays on American radio, which added up is like 5 years of constant airplay, 24 hours a day. So I was trying to think, why is this song so powerful? What is it, you know? And it was the year of Reagan's America, you know, where this old man is watching over us and saying he's going to protect us from the Russians and everything, and I'll be watching you is a kind of comforting image, except that it's not. who wants to be watched all the time? Who wants to, surveillance? And the following year was 1984, and it was almost like the song for George Orwell and Big Brother. At the same time, there's a seduction about the song. There's a lullaby quality to it that is very comforting, and people, in a way, want to be looked after. And that was Reagan's America of the time, So I think that ambivalence, that both sinister and comforting imagery, is what made the song so successful. And although I find it very sinister now, I'm also willing to say that sometimes I find it very beautiful. I wrote King of Pain in Jamaica in, I think, '82. It was during the Falklands War, or the Malvinas War, as they call it in Argentina. And I was going through a bit of a crisis. I was very depressed. And I was staying in Fleming's house, the guy who wrote the James Bond books, which now belongs to Chris Blackwell. He lent me the house to just to get myself together. And it was a very hot day, and I looked at the sun, and there was a black spot on the sun. And I thought, what a great symbol for something. And a black hat in the treetop. And then I built the song from there. I also wrote Every Breath You Take there, in the same place. Wrapped Around Your Finger. People tell me this is part of my trilogy about marriage and divorce. I don't know. I mean, I suppose it is, but you don't think, in retrospect, it's easy to say that, At the time, because you're living the life, you're not sure what it's about. I was very much into the idea of the sorcerer's apprentice turning his master's work on him, back on the master, and showing him who's the boss, I'm that kind of person, really. I learn stuff and then I use it. So I suppose, that was my deviousness coming to song. In The Sahara was inspired by a book by Paul Bowles called The Sheltering Sky. And there's a wonderful story, an Arab story, it's a traditional Arab story told inside the book, about three sisters who, their only wish is to have a tea party in the desert with this prince, this Arab prince. And he agrees to have tea with them, and says he'll come back next year. And they look forward to it all year, but he never comes back. Make what you will of that one. I thought it was a beautiful story, a very sad story, and I think it was one of the best things we ever recorded, actually. The band played great, and Andy played some great stuff. Murder by Numbers. I got into a lot of trouble with this in America because they didn't have the game Painting by Numbers there. It wasn't very well known, whereas in England people were very clear that it was an ironic statement. A lot of people took it as fact. I got a lot of letters from irate parents saying, how could you incite our children to kill us, their parents, or how easy it is to murder people. And in fact, it was an indictment of how easy it is to buy a gun in America. That murder's very simple. And it's basically said that that if you're interested in a career in crime, you start off by bumping people off, one at a time. But if you're really into it, then you become a political leader, and then you can bump off whole generations of people with impunity. So it was actually a song against what a lot of people thought I was. In fact, Jimmy Swaggart, I have to tell you that Jimmy Swaggart at the time held this record up on television, on his television show, and said, I have here in my hand a record by the Police, and I have to tell you there's a song on this album that was written by the devil himself, Satan, Beelzebub. I was somebody played me a tape of this, and I said, no, I wrote this song. It was me.